Welcome along. Today, we're heading over, well, in our imaginations anyway, to the West Bank of the Nile, Luxor, Egypt. We're going to explore a truly magnificent structure, the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut.
It really is something else. This temple, it's more than just old stones. It's this incredible story etched into the landscape, built for a really remarkable figure, Queen Hatshepsut.
A female pharaoh, 18th dynasty, reigns around, what, mid-15th century BC?
That's right, roughly 1479 to 1458 BC. Her just being pharaoh was, well, extraordinary for ancient Egypt.
And the location itself, Deir el-Bahari, it already had history, right? Before her temple.
Absolutely. It was already sacred ground dedicated to the goddess Hathor, plus the earlier mortuary temple of Mentuhotep II was nearby. So layers of significance.
And the name Deir el-Bahari, that's much later.
Yeah, that's the modern Arabic name, Northern Monastery. Comes from its later use by Coptic monks. Fascinating how places just accumulate these stories over time.
Hatshepsut herself is so intriguing, starting as co-regent with Thutmose III, and then some pictures even show her as male. Why was that?
Well, it really highlights how unusual it was for a woman to take that ultimate title, pharaoh. By adopting some of those traditional male symbols, the kilt, the beard, she was likely aiming to solidify her position, her legitimacy in a role that was overwhelmingly male.
Makes sense. So our aim today is really to get under the skin of this place, the history, the architecture, the story behind it all.
Exactly. Uncover what makes this monument so special.
Okay, so let's start basic. These mortuary temples.
Yeah.
Why build them in the first place?
Yeah.
What was the core idea?
Fundamentally, they had this crucial dual role. On one hand, honoring the gods, keeping them happy, maintaining cosmic balance, Maat.
Right.
But just as important, they were built to preserve the memory of the pharaoh's reign forever.
Yeah.
And this remembrance, this eternal legacy, was deeply tied to the stability and, well, the whole development of the Egyptian state.
And the building process itself.
Yeah.
There's that old myth about slaves, right?
Yeah. Ah, yes, the slave labor idea. It's a really persistent myth, but the evidence points elsewhere. We see records indicating that skilled workers and unskilled laborers, too, were actually paid. Egyptians working on these massive state projects.
So more like huge public works projects, employing people.
Exactly. Probably fostered a sense of national purpose, even pride in constructing something so monumental.
Okay, so within that tradition, how does Hatshepsut's temple, Djeser, Holy of Holies, how does it stand out?
Oh, it's particularly stunning. The design itself was inspired by the nearby temple of Mentuhotep II. He founded the 11th dynasty, a much earlier period.
So looking back to the past.
Yes, but then taking it much further. Her steward, Senenmut, who was likely the chief architect, really expanded on that earlier model. It was built on a grander scale than pretty much anything before it.
So not just copying, but consciously trying to one-up the past.
Precisely. She was deliberately linking her reign to Mentuhotep's era, a time of reunification and strength, while simultaneously declaring, look what I can do. For a female ruler trying to cement her place, that kind of monumental statement was, well, incredibly powerful.
And the design itself, those rising terraces, that's so iconic.
It really is. That terrace structure, rising in 3 main levels, cut directly into those imposing limestone cliffs. It's dramatic, and interestingly, it wasn't built overnight.
Nope.
Construction took quite a while, stretching from around her 7th year as ruler to her 20th. And the plans actually changed several times during that period.
Changed how? What sort of modifications?
Well, for instance, we know the Shrine of Hathor was enlarged partway through. It started as maybe one hypostyle hall, a hall full of columns, and ended up with 2. And the overall layout is also quite unusual. Normally, the main axis leads straight to the primary mortuary cult areas, but here, the central axis features the sanctuary for the sacred boat, the bark of Amun-Ra. The actual mortuary complex for Hatshepsut and her father is shifted off to the south.
Okay, interesting. Let's try and picture it. If you were approaching back then, starting at the bottom, the lower terrace, what hits you first?
Right, the lower terrace. It's big, 120 meters deep, 75 wide. You'd arrive via this long causeway, maybe a kilometer long, stretching from a temple down in the valley.
A grand approach.
Very. Then you'd enter this walled courtyard through a single gateway. Inside, imagine 2 Persea trees, maybe some T-shaped pools, perhaps, for growing papyrus or lotus flowers and flanking the ramp up. 2 large statues of lions, resting but watchful.
And the covered areas, the porticos, I understand they had important scenes carved on them.
Absolutely. Each portico had double rows of columns, 22 in total per side, and the reliefs were crucial. The south side showed things like the incredible feat of transporting giant obelisks to Karnak Temple.
Wow.
Hatshepsut presenting them to the god Amun-Ra, depictions of Dedwin, a Nubian god, and the foundation ritual scene symbolically grounding the temple.
And the north side.
The north portico had Hatshepsut shown as a powerful sphinx, trampling Egypt's enemies, scenes of fishing and fouling symbols of controlling chaos and offerings to the gods. And framing the ends of these porticos, huge statues, nearly 8 meters tall, of Hatshepsut as Osiris, god of the afterlife.
Imposing. Okay, heading up the ramp to the middle terrace, what's key there?
The middle terrace is a bit wider, 90 meters, but not as deep, 75. It has porticos on the west side and part of one on the north side. The west ones also had 22 columns in 2 rows.
Now the north one.
That one had 15 columns in a single row, but it seems construction stopped there. It was never fully finished.
Unfinished. That always hints at something, doesn't it? A change of plan, maybe funds running out, or...
Or perhaps political shifts later in her reign. It's hard to say for sure. But the chapels planned for that northern area also seem incomplete. However, the west porticos on this level are incredibly important.
Why is that?
They contain some of the temple's most famous reliefs. The southwest portico tells the story of the expedition to the land of Punt. Think exotic goods like incense trees, ebony, ivory, animals.
Punt expedition, yes. Very famous.
And the northwest portico. That shows the divine birth of Hatshepsut. It's actually the oldest known version of this type of scene, a key piece of propaganda meant to legitimize her rule by showing her father wasn't just Thutmose I, but the god Amun himself.
Claiming divine parentage. That's a bold move.
A very powerful statement in that era. This terrace probably also had more sphinx statues and maybe railings topped with falcons on cobras. And crucially, this is where you find the entrances to 2 important shrines, Hathor to the southwest and Anubis to the north.
Okay, and the final ascent. The upper terrace, what awaits us there?
The upper terrace opens up dramatically. You're faced with a row of 26 columns, but each one is fronted by another huge Osiride statue of Hatshepsut. These ones about 5.2 meters tall.
More giant statues.
Yes, and there's a detail here. The statues on the south wear the white crown of Upper Egypt, the Hedjet. Those on the north wear the double crown, the Phshent, combining the red crown of Lower Egypt with the white.
Ah, symbolizing her rule over the unified kingdom.
Exactly. Even the statues reinforce her complete authority. A massive granite gateway divides this colonnade and leads into the main festival courtyard.
And the reliefs continue the story.
They do. The portico reliefs here depict her coronation, receiving the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. The courtyard inside is surrounded by pillars, 2 rows deep on 3 sides, 3 rows deep on the west. That west wall has lots of niches, 8 small, 10 large, probably held even more statues of Hatshepsut.
Goodness, she wasn't shy about her image.
Not at all. The courtyard reliefs show major religious events.
Yeah.
The beautiful festival of the Valley Procession on the north wall, the Upit Festival on the east, more coronation scenes on the south. And branching off this courtyard are the 3 main cult centers. The Sanctuary of Amun, straight ahead to the west, the Solar Cult Court to the north, and the Mortuary Cult Complex to the south.
These individual shrines sound fascinating. Let's start with Hathor's shrine on the middle terrace.
Right, the Hathor Shrine, south end of the middle terrace, dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love, music, joy, motherhood. She had a really strong ancient connection to this whole Deir el-Bahari area, and Hatshepsut clearly felt a personal link too.
How would you get into it?
There is a ramp coming up directly from the lower terrace, but also access from the upper terrace. The entrance portico had these really distinctive columns, 4 of them with capitals shaped like Hathor's head, a woman's face, but with cow ears.
The cow association, right?
Exactly. Topped with Urae, the royal cobras, and sun discs. Very Hathoric. The entrance wall showed Hatshepsut feeding Hathor, providing for the goddess. Inside, you had 2 hypostyle halls, a vestibule, and then the double sanctuary at the back, the holiest part.
What about the decorations inside?
Lots of reliefs. Hathor appearing with Hatshepsut, another goddess called Weret Hekau, presenting a Menot necklace that's a symbol of Hathor, used like a rattle in rituals. And interestingly, Senenmut, her steward, also appears in the reliefs here. Plus, Hathor was called Lady of Punt, so its location near the Punt reliefs makes perfect sense.
Okay. And opposite Hathor on the north side of the middle terrace, the Anubis Shrine.
Yes, dedicated to Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, mummification, protector of cemeteries, very important for the afterlife. This shrine is smaller than Hathor's.
Simpler layout.
A bit. A hypostyle hall with 12 columns, then 2 inner rooms, and a small niche at the very back. The walls showed offering scenes, cult activities, and one relief depicted Anubis escorting Hatshepsut, guiding her. There might also be a connection here, symbolically, to the heir to the throne, Thutmose III.
Interesting political undertones, perhaps. Now let's go up to that upper level again, to what you said was probably the most sacred spot, the sanctuary of Amun.
Yes, right at the back, on the main axis. The heart of the temple, really. Dedicated to Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. Hatshepsut called it a garden for my father Amun.
What was inside?
The first room was a chapel specifically for Amun's sacred bark, the boat used in processions. It had a skylight, an opening in the roof, probably designed so sunlight would hit Amun's statue at certain times. The doorway lintel, made of red granite, showed Amun seated twice with kings kneeling, inside. Reliefs of Hatshepsut and her father, Thutmose I, making offerings, plus more statues, 4 Osiride ones of Hatshepsut, and 6 niches likely holding statues of Amun himself. This room was the final stop for that beautiful festival of the valley.
And deeper inside.
Behind the bark chapel was a second chamber, probably holding the main cult statue of Amun. It was flanked by smaller side chapels with reliefs showing the major groups of gods, the Enneads of Heliopolis and Thebes. Then, a third chamber at the very back, likely for the daily rituals performed for the god. It might have had a granite false door, a symbolic portal. People used to think this part was added much later, in Ptolemaic times, but now the evidence points to it being part of Hatshepsut's original design.
Okay, and still on the upper terrace, you mentioned a solar cult court. To the north.
That's right. You entered it from the main courtyard through a small vestibule. The doorway showed Hatshepsut with Ra-Horakhti, that's a combined form of the sun gods Ra and Horus and Amun. Inside the main court, it was open to the sky, dominated by a large altar reached by stairs.
An open-air altar for sun worship.
Exactly. Niches around the court had reliefs. Ra-Horakhti giving the Ankh, the symbol of life, to Hatshepsut, Hatshepsut acting as a priestess. There was also a small chapel attached, showing her family Thutmose assessed, her mother Ahmose, making offerings.
And finally, that complex shifted off to the south side of the upper courtyard, the mortuary cult complex.
Yes, this is specifically for the funerary cults. Accessed via another vestibule, it led to 2 offering halls on an east-west axis. The northern one was for her father, Thutmose I. It was smaller.
And the southern one.
That was for Hatshepsut herself, much larger, with a high vaulted ceiling over 6 meters high. The design deliberately copied the style of offering halls found in Old and Middle Kingdom pyramids, a way of linking herself to those ancient traditions of kingship.
What was in these halls?
Both had red granite false doors, the symbolic way for the spirit, the Ka, to receive offerings. The walls were covered in scenes you'd expect: animal sacrifices, piles of food and drink offerings, processions of offering bearers, priests performing rituals, and, crucially, the deceased Thutmose in his hall, Hatshepsut in hers, shown seated before a table piled high with food, ready for their eternal sustenance. The scenes in Hatshepsut's hall are known to be very closely based on those in the Pyramid of Pepi II, an Old Kingdom pharaoh.
So pulling all these pieces together, what was the temple for, primarily? Its main function?
Primarily, it served the royal mortuary cults, ensuring the eternal well-being of the Ka, the spirit or life force of both Hatshepsut and her father, Thutmose I. This involved regular rituals, especially offerings of food and drink presented before those false doors in their chapels.
Sustenance for the afterlife.
Exactly. And the reliefs on the east walls of those chapels depicted all the necessary rituals and offerings, making them magically effective forever.
And you mentioned it was the end point for a big festival.
Yes, the beautiful Festival of the Valley. This was a major annual event. It started over at Karnak Temple on the East Bank. Amun's sacred bark, maybe a smaller portable version carried by priests, or maybe floated on a barge, would travel across the Nile to the West Bank.
A big procession.
Huge. Led by the pharaoh, so Hatshepsut, and for a time, Thutmose III alongside her. Musicians, dancers, priests, soldiers, the whole populace probably joining in. They'd cross the river, stop at Hatshepsut's valley temple down by the cultivation, maybe perform purification rites, then proceed along this grand avenue, possibly lined with sphinxes. It's one of the oldest attested examples of such an avenue, all the way up the ramps of the temple, finally bringing Amun's statue to rest overnight in his sanctuary at the back. a massive display of religious piety and royal power, connecting the living king with the gods and the blessed dead.
An incredible image. But the temple's story didn't end with Hatshepsut, did it? It had a pretty rough time later on.
Sadly, yes, it suffered quite a bit, maybe only 2 decades or so after her death. During Thutmose III's sole reign, there was a systematic campaign to erase her memory.
A damnatio in memoriam.
Exactly. References to her rule, her name, her images. They were scratched out, chiseled away, sometimes plastered over. Sometimes her figure was recarved into an offering table, or usurped, often replaced with images of Thutmose II, her husband and predecessor. Her statues were dragged out, smashed, and buried in pits, like the famous Hatshepsut hole.
Why? Why do that to a pharaoh?
The exact reasons are still debated. Was it personal animosity from Thutmose III? Was it simply that the concept of a female king was ultimately seen as an aberration, something that disrupted Ma'at, the cosmic order, and needed correcting? Maybe a dynastic dispute? We don't know for sure.
And that wasn't the only wave of damage?
No. Later, during the Amarna period under Akhenaten, his agents came through hacking out images of the traditional gods, especially Amun. That caused more damage.
So damage from religious zealotry, too.
Yes. Then later kings like Tutankhamun, Horemheb, and Ramesses II actually tried to repair some of the Amarna damage, and Ramesses II even put Thutmose III's names back over some of Hatshepsut's erased cartouches. Then there was an earthquake, probably in the Third Intermediate period, that caused more structural damage.
Just kept taking hits.
It did. In the Ptolemaic era, much later, they actually renovated the Amun sanctuary under Ptolemy VIII, adding a portico, and Ptolemy III built a small stone chapel on the middle terrace dedicated to the Greek healing god Asclepios. So reuse and adaptation, too.
And even later.
Beyond ancient Egypt, it remained a site of local veneration for a time. Then, from around the 6th to 8th centuries AD, a Coptic Christian monastery dedicated to Saint Phoebamon was built right onto the temple structure. They even painted Christian saints and scenes over some of the original pharaonic reliefs. The last dated bit of graffiti is from around 1223 AD.
So pharaonic temple, Greek shrine, Christian monastery, quite a history. And then came the archaeologists.
Indeed. Early European travelers noted it. But serious work started in the mid-19th century with Auguste Mariette. He uncovered the Hathor and Anubis shrines. Then Edouard Neville, working with a young Howard Carter.
Carter of Tutankhamun fame.
The very same. They did the first really complete excavation and produced the fundamental reports on the temple. Later, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York sponsored a lot of work, focusing on clearing debris and finding statue fragments. Emile Barres did early reconstruction work. And since 1961, the Polish Center of Mediterranean Archaeology has been doing incredible ongoing restoration and conservation work there.
And they're still finding things.
They are. Recently, they've uncovered lots of colorful painted blocks from Hatshepsut's Valley Temple down by the Nile floodplain. That area was only briefly looked at by Carter, so these finds are really significant. And they've also found ancient tools, chisels, hammers with inscriptions linking them directly to the construction of Djeser itself.
Those Valley Temple blocks sound important, filling a gap in knowledge.
Definitely. As Egyptologist Aidan Dodson pointed out, we knew a lot about the main temple, but the Valley Temple was largely a mystery. These finds are giving us real insights into what that gateway structure looked like and how it functioned.
Before we wrap up, are there any other sort of standout facts or aspects about the temple you find particularly compelling?
Well, a few things always strike me. Architecturally, that blend of traditional Egyptian forms with something that feels almost Proto-Greek in its linearity and use of colonnades, it's quite unique. Then there's the sheer audacity of the divine birth scenes, that powerful political statement. The success of the Punt expedition, bringing back live incense trees, amazing. And despite all those attempts to erase her, the temple itself just refused to disappear. It's such a massive statement on the landscape.
Her legacy endured through stone.
Absolutely. There's even some tantalizing, though not conclusive, evidence suggesting she might have originally planned to be buried within the temple complex itself, which would have been a major break from tradition. And as we said, the ongoing discoveries, like those tools and Valley Temple blocks, just keep adding layers to our understanding.
So if we were to summarize the essence of this incredible place.
Okay, the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut. It's this breathtaking piece of ancient architecture, perfectly integrated into its dramatic cliff setting. Its unique terrace design, the detailed reliefs telling stories of her reign, her divinity, her achievements. They give us priceless insights into Egyptian beliefs and culture in the 18th dynasty. The different shrines show the complex religious landscape and its history, creation, desecration, rediscovery, restoration. It really tells a story about memory, power, and the enduring legacy of ancient Egypt.
It really does offer this unparalleled window into the world of one of Egypt's most remarkable rulers, especially being a female pharaoh.
It truly does. It speaks volumes about her ambition, her vision, and how she projected her power across time.
And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about those layers of history we discussed. The building, the deliberate attempt to erase her, the later additions, the rediscovery. How does that process itself, the destruction and reconstruction, shape how we see Hatshepsut today? Sometimes trying to erase someone just makes their story louder, doesn't it? It really makes you consider the power monuments hold and how history is constantly being written and rewritten. Definitely something to ponder as we leave Hatshepsut's magnificent temple.